welcome to our Thursday Thought. I'm Dave Smith. Joining with me is Kirk Davis. And before we get started on today's thought, we just want to let you know we are not attorneys. We always have to say that. So if there's anything legal that we discuss, please know that we cannot help you with any of that. You do have to seek out the advice of an attorney for any of the legal discussion in today's topic. And if you need a referral to an attorney, we certainly can provide that to you. Let's talk about the Family Financial Partners logo for just 1 second, just to do a recap. It's a 5-piece puzzle logo, the shape of a tree, the 5 areas we have on your own, which we've covered. Today, we're going to be covering the tie and the knot, which is, so we're going from graduation, which a lot of people, well, including my now kindergarten graduate, failed to actually have a real graduation ceremony, but a lot of people have graduated the last 10 days. As you go from graduation, typically the natural thing is you find someone to spend the rest of your life with and tie the knot. And then, of course, a baby arrives. And all the experts out there are saying that we are going to have a giant baby boom when this pandemic is completely over and we all come out of this, out of our homes and selected holes we've been hanging out in the last few months and start to circulate again. But 9 months, we're going to see a bunch of babies out there and a whole nother generation. And as I mentioned to someone the other day, I said, it's actually not a bad thing. If you think about it, this whole next generation is going to be the people that pay into Social Security so that you get Social Security. That actually put a grin on the fellow's face. So there is hope for Social Security too with this new baby boom. In addition, we have the pre-retirement segment. That is, of course, that stage when the kids are leaving home. They're starting families of their own. Mom and dad, you're at home and you are saying, okay, we've got a few years to plan before our eventual retirement. So what do we need to do to get our financial house in order so that we can eventually have that continuous paycheck? And of course, that continuous paycheck stage is retirement. And that's when people are having the discussion of, if I have a pension, what do I select? When is the right time and what amount should I take from Social Security? What do I do with my 401k? What do I do with my employee benefits that are ending and health insurance and all those things depend on your age. So those are all typical retirement topics that we cover. But these are the 5 life stages that we just believe that the majority of people at one point or another are going to find yourself in. And so today what we want to do, though, is focus on the tying the knot stage. And we know we have 2 audiences here. We have an audience of folks that may be tying the knot for the very first time. You may be someone that has tied the knot 50 years ago and you're still married, right? And so you're kind of looking back and going, well, I'm just kind of interested in what they have to say. What did I miss out when I was in my 20s on? And or you may be in a third boat, which is the boat of, I did tie the knot years and years ago. That cord broke, and so I may be looking for tying the knot the next time. And or I've just no good at marriage, Dave. What are some things I need to think about the next time around? And if so, we've got a little information for every single person in any of those groups. So when it comes to just laying the stage for the conversation today, what we're seeing is that many people are simply marrying later and later. It's whether people are just staying in mom and dad's home or on the couch or in the basement for a lot longer, and so they're not going out and they're not meeting people of the opposite sex or same sex, whether they're taking more time to get through college or their education, or whether a pandemic hits and suddenly they have to move back in home because they just lost their job. The reality is people are marrying later and later simply because they're not circulating quite as much on their own, is what we're seeing. And so within that, though, that stage, the reality is once you do find that person that you want to tie the knot with, there is a financial conversation that has to happen. And so today we're going to talk about what that conversation needs to be and some things you should think about. The natural things that people think about are, well, we're going to have to merge our financial plans potentially into one plan, because sometimes maybe one person's working with one financial planner, another person's working with another financial planner, and you were planning for your life on your own. And now suddenly there's 2 lives coming together. And within that conversation, then with the financial planner that you talk to, there's going to be those obvious planning topics like, well, you're going to maintain joint or separate accounts. What are you going to do if there's children involved? And let's make a list of all your assets and your debts so we can discuss them. And hopefully you're on the same page. But then there's also those, what I call not so obvious planning topics. There may be X's if applicable, right? There may be a health history that is something you need to talk about or consider. There may be mental wellness issues, lifestyle, long-term life and career goals. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people that just simply tie the knot, get married, buy a house, and then are like, what do we do next? And the second time around, we see the same pattern. People sell their houses, buy one house, tie the knot, and then 6 months, 12 months later, they talk to a financial planner. Well, in my perfect world, they would actually flip that. And before they tie the knot, before they decide what they're going to do, they'd actually have kind of a financial conversation at the very start. Because when they say that financial stress is the #1 ender of all marriages, to me, it just makes sense as a financial planner, then that should be the #1 thing we should actually focus on and then see how everything plays out around that. So, but with me today is our very own Kirk Davis. Kirk, isn't it great to be back here in the office?
It really is. You know, I enjoyed working from home for about the first week or so, but after that, it got really old really quick. And this is, I guess, week 2 back in the office, and, you know, I'm still excited about it. So it's good to be back.
And we're, of course, doing this socially distant. You're in another conference room. I'm in my office today so that we do not have to wear masks, breathe upon each other, and you know, create this additional, you know, contagion within our office, right? Now, Kirk, I have a question for you. And this,
What do you got?
You can't do a tying the knot conversation without asking you a question. This could be could be a trick question, could be a real question, right? I talked to Hannah about this, but how many years exactly have you been married, Kirk? And do you remember your wedding date?
I do. You know, I studied for this because I knew once we started talking about this topic, you know, this question had to come up. So the wedding date is September 27th. So we're just over the 5.5-year point, and, you know, going on 6 now.
Well, correct. You're correct on both of those, actually. I had to write them down just to double check, but I'm sure there'll be a prize at home for you for getting those answers correct. So, Kirk, what can you tell us, though, when we go ahead?
I said, I hope she's watching. She's at work right now. So, you know, I might get brownie points if she's on.
I get it. So what can you tell us about some of those obvious planning topics? You know, like what do you want to cover with folks today?
Yeah. Well, when we talk about the obvious things, you know, you kind of alluded to some of them already. But I want to preface this with the first thing is just to be open and upfront with each other. Now, this is something that needs to happen prior to actually saying I do. So lay everything out on the table. Talk about any kind of good tendencies you have with money, any bad tendencies, what assets you have built up, what debts you have, what your income is like, how you make financial decisions. It's best to lay all this out on the table now, because what we certainly don't want to happen is we get married, we go on a honeymoon, we come home, and, you know, we're on cloud 9, and then, you know, bills start rolling in from debts that, you know, we didn't know the other spouse had. Or we start seeing some of the spending habits that our spouse has, and they don't align with ours, and we never talked about how we're going to handle this. So like you mentioned, you know, the #1 cause of divorce, you know, by many studies is disagreements or stress around finances. So I firmly believe that we're open and upfront prior to actually saying I do. We're going to work through a lot of those problems, and we're going to have a lot smoother marriage, you know, long term.
Yeah. And, you know, Kirk, having been someone that was married for 20 years and has gone through a divorce, kind of looking back at the other side, what I can tell you, and just looking at the 24 years now that I've been doing financial planning, what I can tell you in every single conversation is when there were issues of people having problems with being open up front on the financial side, it always trickles down through the rest of the relationship and not being able to be open and upfront, because you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. right? With oh, I've got this credit card, or you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings with, oh, I made some bad decisions, or I've got some bad habits. Everyone wants to kind of gussy things up and have it as pretty imperfect. But I think you're absolutely right. Communication is so essential. And the way I put it is this way: if you can't communicate with the person that you're getting ready to spend the rest of your life with, then who are you going to communicate with, right? So communication, being open up front, super, super important at this stage of life.
So going on from there, so the kind of the first, real planning topic, if you will, or the first real question that everybody asks is, well, should we combine everything, or should we keep separate financial lives? Now, at first, I'm going to talk to what I call someone that's on the traditional timeline, if you will. So by that, I mean, you go to college, graduate, get your first job, and then soon after that, you say, I do. So typically, what I see from those people is they don't really have a very complex financial life. So by that, I mean, they don't have a lot of assets built up yet. They probably don't have a lot of debt outside of some student loan debt. Normally, no children that are going to, cause, different mindsets there. If we're looking at that person from day one, I say, yes, you should combine everything. So look at your income not as a person A and person B income. Look at it as a joint income. And why I think that is important is sometimes we see one spouse significantly earns a lot more than the other spouse, and if you earn more, you tend to spend more. And if you're the spouse that is on the lower side of the income spectrum, it can cause some differences there, and feel like, well, maybe I'm spending money that I shouldn't spend. Or if you're the higher earning spouse, you feel like you're the one supporting the lower income the whole time. But if you go in it with the mindset of it's not A and B, it's one bucket together, I think you're setting yourself up for success with that. So then we'll look at some. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say you're absolutely right when it comes to that with the mindset of A and B, and we're in this together, right? Because we do see when couples come in and one is a per se the breadwinner of the couple, right? Sometimes you will kind of get the messages of well, yeah, I spend the money because I make the money, and if person B wants to spend more money, then they just need to make more money. And that is just so unhealthy. I think that what we do see a lot of times when people have been living single before they tie that knot, even if they are at different, financial, different financial picture, the healthy relationship is one where we see the person that continues to live within their means of what they were living within. It may just be a little bit bigger house, or it may be, a couple extra trips, but the vehicles don't really change much from their patterns of how they did their vehicles. Their savings don't change a lot. Their shopping habits don't change a lot, because they're still supporting those based on what they were doing for so many years before that wedding. And in those relationships, we tend to see those relationships thrive. Because there's not that expectation of, I just hit the lottery because this person makes X amount of money.
Yeah. And, and I find that, when you combine everything, it forces each side of the relationship to make compromises so that they do get on the same page there. And, if you're on the same page about, how you spend money and how you save money and what those different goals are, you make more progress, down, long term. And again, kind of tying back to reducing financial stress in your life. If you guys are on the same page, it's inevitable that you're going to, as long as you came onto the same page, in agreements, it's inevitable that you're going to have less, stress about your finances and less conflict there. And that's, like you said, it's going to result in a better marriage overall, and most likely a better financial future as well.
So what if someone's in the scenario that it's a different scenario than what you just described.
Yeah.
What if they've been, what if there's a reason for them to keep things separate, or what if they're just more comfortable keeping things separate? What if they're different?
Yeah, so we come across that, from time to time. Now, again, I was talking that first section there. I was talking about what I call the traditional marriage timeline. So if you're different, if you're not that couple, and maybe this is your second go around, or maybe you're just getting married later in life, and you've already built up, significant assets, or you have, debts, or you have children, any number of different factors, your situation is going to be a bit more complex. Now, I still recommend combining everything going forward. But if we talk about what's pre-existing, and this is kind of where I link back into being open and upfront with each other. There's not necessarily a right or wrong way to merge your finances. In the case of debt, I still think it's going to be, the right answer is to, combine that and work on a payment strategy between the two of you. But when we start looking at the assets, it can be a little bit different. For example, maybe you've gotten an inheritance from a parent or grandparent, and you have a child from a previous relationship. Well, when we see that, a lot of times, whoever that parent is that got the inheritance wants to earmark that for their child. And that makes perfect sense. We get that. I understand it. I don't think that's, a wrong or a right thing to do. It's just a thing to do. But we can, get off track of combining everything. So I think that's fine, but we still need to have the conversation of what do we want to do with this? How do we want to earmark these funds, and how do we want to combine this? And if you have these discussions prior to saying I do, you're not going to enter the relationship with a different mindset, or being in a disagreement from the start. Everything is laid out, and you're going to have less conflict long term.
So what's the next step, Kirk?
So from there, like everything, we want to make sure we're legal. So whatever outcome came from your conversation there, go and speak with an attorney, and put everything, make sure the legal foundation is set. So maybe that means creating a trust, for your kid that's going to house some of your assets that you have earmarked to go to them. And then we get into the little bit of the awkward conversation sometimes that, goes around prenups. So everybody, I don't care who you are, you enter into a marriage with the mindset of, well, we're going to be married forever. And if you don't enter with that mindset, I don't know why you're getting married to begin with. But when you have that, it doesn't make a lot of sense to start it off with a document saying, well, this is what's going to happen, if we get divorced. I get there can be some, awkwardness there, and you want to avoid it, but, kind of bite the bullet on it, take the time, have the conversation, and get it in place. And it really just protects you both, going forward. And I kind of like to think of it like life insurance. Now, my wife and I, we both have life insurance policies, and it's not because, we hope the other one's gonna die and we get a big payout. But we had it just so that in the event of something tragic, in this case a death, but in the prenup case, a divorce, in that tragic event, and make sure that both parties are going to be protected and that their best interests are going to be in mind long term.
Well, Kirk, your situation, I'm not necessarily so sure about the life insurance. I talked to Hannah the other day, and she mentioned to me that she was complaining about the pillows in your bedroom being too breathable, and she felt like, if she just got ones that are a little less breathable, there might be a payday in her future. So
there could be. But on the other side of that, she went out golfing with me the other day, and she liked to, she's starting to play herself, but she was just riding around in the cart with me the other day, and I'm not going to lie, I hit one kind of offline, and I was behind the tree, and I thought I was better than I was, and I was going to try to carve the ball around the tree. Well, what happened was I hit the tree directly, and the ball bounced back and hit the cart and almost hit Hannah. So we almost both got a payout.
Touche, right? But in all seriousness, we do have older clients in situations, right? We see a lot of this. People don't think about this all the time, where they're getting married. We've had clients in their 70s and 80s getting married again because maybe both their spouses have passed away, right? And so they're both widows, and so they're finally tying the knot again. And at that stage, really, at that stage, it's even, I think, more important to make sure that the legal situation is taken care of, because in that stage of life, you've typically already built up some assets, right? And what you do not want to do is accidentally disinherit your grown children or even your grown grandchildren at that stage, or possibly any great grandchildren. So and yet again, even at that age, it's still an awkward conversation, but it's just one that has to happen. And it actually, while it is difficult to have, it actually ends up putting, I think, the rest of the family in those kind of situations at ease. And it doesn't become the TV drama of, my parent married somebody that's 10 years younger than me, and they're going to get everything that, we see in all these movies and shows on TV. But it really becomes something where, no, we're doing some planning for the family as a sign of love for the family. So that legal approach is very important. And as a side note, Kirk, I mean, you can always change the beneficiary on your life insurance if, you or Hannah, based on this conversation.
Hopefully we don't have to. But
all right. So when it comes to things that the other areas that people want to review in that tying the knot, we kind of hinted at it with just, legal documents and life insurance. But I know employee benefits also plays into that scenario. So tell us about employee benefits. What do we need to consider there?
Yeah. So if you started working with us kind of on your own stage, one of the things that we did for you is go through and look at all the benefits that were given to you by your employer, whether it's health insurance, some group life insurance, or disability, and 401k, amongst other items. Well, now that you're married, things change. Your needs change, your life changes there, and don't just assume that those benefits that you selected when you were single are going to be most appropriate for you when you're married. So come in, we'll take a look at both benefit packages offered to you guys, and we'll help you, make the best selections possible. So maybe that means, one spouse has really good health insurance that has a good rate and great coverage, and it's better than the one that you're previously on. Well, in that case, we definitely want to make the transition and try to get on that better health insurance plan versus both of us, having separate there. Same thing, with the group life insurance. Maybe we didn't take advantage of all of it because when we were single, frankly, we didn't need a whole lot of life insurance. And now that we're married, we need to up it to get the most, life insurance that we can. So we'll look through, help you make those elections and help you protect yourself and your family. And then on kind of the asset side of that, well, both of you likely bring 401ks to the table. Now, when we talked about wanting to combine everything, now we can't combine the retirement assets into one account, of course, but we can combine how we're invested and make sure we have an allocation that is appropriate for your entire portfolio. So from a practical standpoint, what that might look like is, spouse A has, really good, say, international funds within their 401k. And spouse B, has either no international funds or maybe has some very poor performing funds. Well, if that's the case, instead of spouse B, having just taken advantage of, lackluster funds, maybe we can overweight spouse A's portfolio in that sector and underweight spouse B's. All with the idea of building the best possible portfolio we can for you.
So in that scenario, I mean, there's just looking at the overall benefits picture and trying to figure out what's best for each person, and then sitting down with their planner and constructing a plan on how to attack it. And it's not just it's not just a set it and forget it activity, right? It's something that they're going to need to come back to you to discuss.
Yeah, so we'll set it, and usually every fall is when we kind of have the open enrollment period, and we can change some of the benefits that we select for the next year. I always recommend anytime that HR sends you some kind of email or sends you a new benefits book, just forward that to us or drop it off at our office. We'll look through it, and if anything has changed or any changes need to be made, we'll let you know. That way you don't have to stress about it, and we can take care of that for you.
Okay. So to wrap up, Kirk, what are the things people just kind of need to keep in mind for those folks that are, getting ready to tie the knot, and kind of the big picture summary?
Yeah. So I think we can boil most of this down into kind of one theme, and that was what I said right from the start, was to be open and upfront. So have these discussions prior to actually getting married. That way nobody enters the relationship with some kind of different expectation that wasn't, that didn't line up with the other spouse. Try to combine as much of your lives as you can. That helps you get on helps you be more cohesive with your finances as well as within your marriage. And then, if anything is complex in your life that requires some updated legal documents, go ahead and make those and take care of those now.
Okay, that's really good stuff. I think people are going to really appreciate, just kind of those tips and hearing that. And we appreciate you pitching in and the hard work of putting this together, Kirk.
Thank you.
Let's talk about some of the not so obvious planning items now. And these are I'm going to have some fun with this. Okay. Again, my story, married for 20 years. So I feel like divorced for a few now, but I feel like I've earned a graduate degree on both sides of the equation. But the one thing I would start before I start with my tips is, if you are tying the knot, whether you're tying the knot that first time or you're tying the knot however many iterations of it is down the road, I would definitely recommend that you go out and you purchase the book, The 5 Love Languages. That's The 5 Love Languages. It's like $10. It's an easy read, and I would recommend you purchase it for yourself and for the person that you're considering tying the knot with. I know years and years and years, so 25 plus years ago, I guess, I did wedding counseling, right? Kind of premarital counseling. And the guy that did our premarital counseling, just thinking back to it, gave us a book with some critical questions in there. But honestly, I don't think we ever really got through most of that book. And so what the 5 Love Languages does, though, is it takes you through, without having a real big, thick book, it just takes you through the idea of thinking of love, not from the perspective of being in love and the act of falling in love, but thinking of it from the standpoint of, love takes work. It is something that you build over time. It is not easy. It takes a lot of effort. Akin to, from the business world, I can tell you, falling in love is like, hey, I got a great idea for a startup business, right? The act of actually being in love and showing love is taking that startup and building it actually into a successful business that can stand on its own, even when you walk away for a couple months because of a pandemic. So I would really recommend the 5 Love Languages. And if you're just listening and you want the cliff note, the 5 Love Languages, I'll just give them to you. They're words of affirmation, they're gifts, they're acts of service, their quality time, and their physical touch. And the idea behind the book is that every single person in this world has at least one of those items as their primary love language, and one of the other items as a secondary. And so, but typically people that speak the same love language don't partner up. And so learning to speak the other person's love language is very important. So without getting into all the psychology of it, I would just tell you that could be a book that could save you a lot of money from a financial planner's perspective and someone who's been on both sides of the equation. Now let's talk about some of the not so other obvious ones, and some of these ones are ugly, but I'm going to go through this as cleanly as I can. Okay. The first thing that you got to worry about, you got to worry about the other person and their ex. Okay. Now, some people are in the situation that, hey, there were no kids involved. The ex is in a different state. You'll never see him again. That's clean. That's easy. That's about as simple as it comes. In other situations, though, the ex will be present because there will be children. There'll be custody issues. In those types of situations, you have to look at not only how the person that you're dating, right, and that you're thinking of tying the knot with relates to their ex, because it most likely is how potentially they relate to you. In addition, you have to consider how that ex relates to the children and what that relationship is, if there's the ability to co-parent, how they communicate, those sorts of things. Now, obviously, that's a tough one. I mean, there's never going to be a perfect score on a 1 to 10. It's always going to be somewhere in between. There's really bad exes and there's really good exes. But not considering that and failing to consider that and only focusing on the finances and on the budgeting and on, those types of the happy things, the easy things, in my opinion, is doing yourself a disservice. So make sure that you take the time to have the conversations about, and the ex, the children, and figure out how you're going to fit in, because you're not just marrying the other person across from you. Potentially, if it's a second marriage, you're marrying the village. The second thing to consider, and this is something that a lot of people, every single one of us that exists on this earth, right? We all leave the earth the same way, and we all pretty much come into the world the same way, okay? So, but a person's health history, every single one of us has a different health history. And so it is important that you do consider that health history and how it will affect you. As an example, my personal health history, right? Everyone that knows me and knows me forever knows that I've had asthma since I was 5 years old. Now, do I run around with an inhaler stuck to my hand all the time? No. A couple times a year, do I run around with an inhaler stuck to my hand? Absolutely. When it's like spring and fall and the whole seasons are changing, anyone in the office knows I'm puffing away on that inhaler. But it's pretty much controlled. But at the same time, there's days where the pollens are bad, or, animals get me, right? Or who knows? I think lately I've been alert to the sunshine for all I know, because every time I cough, of course, the kids say coronavirus. But it's out there. So these are the things you need to be considering, though, is what that person's health history is, and looking at their family health history, and considering, how that might impact you down the road. Looking at their parents and how they've taken care of themselves. That's very important. None of us are exactly like our parents, but genetics are important things. So just consider that health history. The next thing that people don't always consider is mental wellness. I can't tell you the number of times that we've heard stories of everything was fine and we got married, and then we found out the other person was on a medication they didn't tell us about. And then they stopped taking the medication, and that's when the problems really started. But I tied the knot. I said, till death do I part, and I got to stick with them, Dave. That's a tough situation to be in. So again, it's just like finances are a difficult conversation to have. It's also difficult and for some people, a sign of weakness to even talk about their health history and or their mental wellness. Now, I'm not saying that just because, for example, you had an uncle in the 1920s that had a lobotomy, which may actually be true, it doesn't mean you're cray-cray, right? Because lobotomies in the 20s were a whole different medical procedure than they are today. But those are things that you want to consider. Is there anxiety? Is there depression? What type of things are in that family's health history and in your potential mate's health history that you may want to keep in mind. Mental illness. Another area, lifestyle. And I cannot tell you how many times this becomes a point of contention for people. There's the initial kind of, I always ask people how they met, right? And people will say like, oh, it was so wonderful. Joe took me on a hot air balloon ride at daybreak. And then as the sun crept over and the clouds disappeared, we toasted the morning with, champagne, and we released a couple doves, and then we landed in a field and had a luxurious brunch or lunch or whatnot. Okay, well, if it started that way, that's awesome. I'm totally jealous, okay? But I can tell you, just like the hot air balloon, it's probably all just going to go straight downhill from there, because nobody can kind of keep that thing up unless you happen to find a person with a B in front of their name, like billionaire, so-and-so. There's just as many other relationships, of course, that start in a bar with warm beer and a fight breaks out in between the band sets. And believe it or not, I'm of the opinion that whether you meet the gal that way or whether you meet in the hot air balloon ride, probably what you'll remember the most is going to be the fight in between the sets. No, you're not going to remember the warm beer. You're not going to remember the bar. You're going to remember the fight. Just like whatever happened on the hot air balloon ride, maybe a bird flew over and pooped on somebody's nose, right? That's the thing you're going to remember from it. You're not going to remember actually the sun coming up or things. So the idea is making sure at not just in the kind of engagement stage or the dating stage, making sure that the lifestyle that you're wanting to have is the lifestyle that other person shares, but also that you can financially afford that lifestyle, and communicating that and having that conversation and saying, okay, if we want to do this, there's trade-offs. We're not going to be able to do the hot air balloon rides. I've had clients tell me all the time where they've said, life was great. We both had great jobs. And then the kids went to college and suddenly we're so poor, we're having to drink like Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, and we can't even afford Sam Adams. And of course, this was years and years ago. I just dated myself on this because I think now Pabst is probably more expensive than Sam Adams, right? But it used to be when I was in college, that was the cheap 25-cent a can beer you could get. Now it's $6.50 rebranded. So the idea is just making sure that the lifestyle is important, but also as there's things happening in that lifestyle, that those long-term life and career goals are things that you touch base with. It can be really exciting in the moment to fall in love with someone. It can be really exciting in the moment to decide to tie the knot, but at the same time, making sure that not only laying out what you want your longer term life goals, like it could be for you, it could be for your kids, it could be for your community, but also your career goals. Are those career goals things that allow you to actually be around your family more, or are those career goals things that are going to put you on the road and take you away from your family? Those are kind of important things for that new person in your life to have in perspective, so that a few years down the road, as they happen and you say, I'm just doing me, I'm just living my life, it doesn't suddenly become a giant stumbling block and a problem and a sign of inaffection for the other person. So the thoughts are simply, these are the not so obvious types of things that you should consider. And the thought that we have for you as financial planners is sometimes it's real easy when you come into our office and you say, okay, here are my assets. Here are our checking and savings accounts. Here are our debts, credit cards, student loans, car payments, mortgages, whatever. Here are the number of kids we have. Here's our general health history. Here's our family. Will we have to take care of them or not? Yes, no. What's the plan? This is when we'd like to retire. This is the next major asset we're planning for. This is education for the kids. Those are all just standard things, right? But what we want to do today is just point out the not so standard things that you also need to consider, that are the things that actually make that relationship work. And the reason that it's important to Kirk and I, that you have that conversation and that you think about those kind of not so obvious things, is ultimately when we invest our time in you as financial planners, we want your family to succeed, right? We do not want, it's not our preference for a divorce to occur. It's not at all. In fact, at Family Financial Partners, we have a very low divorce rate in our overall client families that we work with. And I think there are probably some patterns with that, with financial success, right? There's more financial success. It's a lot easier to obtain more assets and to have just an easier life glide path, if you will, the longer you do stay married. That's a no-brainer, because there is a significant cost of divorce. But the thing that we want to make sure is that if we can help you have those conversations and or just at least remind you of having those conversations with your significant other, whether you're getting ready to get married, whether you're engaged, whether you just got married, whether you've been married for 20, 30, 6, or 50 years, right? There's no better time to have this kind of conversation than the present, to make sure that you're on the same page, and or if you're not on the same page, give yourself some time to iron it out before it becomes a big deal. So with that, we really want to thank you guys for joining us for our Tie in the Knot segment. We really hope you found this thought-provoking. We hope it's helped you, and we really do wish you success and joy in your upcoming nuptials. So thank you for joining us. This has been another Thursday Thought. If you have any questions, feel free to email myself at david.smith@familyfinancialpartners.com or Kirk at kirkdavis@familyfinancialpartners.com, or you can give us a call through Katie here in the office at 859-219-1006. Thanks and have a great day, guys.